Kevin Zay. Some high control groups turn you into a project, so to speak, to bring you back into the fold once you leave. I realize declared people are completely cut off from other Scientologists, but aside from that, are there other situations in which people who are still active Scientologists would contact you if you suddenly decided to become less active than you once were? Yes, absolutely. In fact, this is something I personally did for a couple years in Scientology and spent a great deal of time, hundreds of hours, maybe thousands, over the time back, all the way going back to Santa Barbara, all through my time through at being a staff member there, and then in my later Sea Org years when I was going out knocking door to door on people's houses to get them back into the fold. This was absolutely a whole job within the Sea Org, getting people called in, getting people recovered. That's what they call it, recovering students or PCs or pre-clears back to Scientology is a thing, and it's a documented, methodical thing. I'm actually pulled out a policy letter from 1972 because I love reading from the scriptures, and I thought you would appreciate this because it's the direct answer to your question. And this policy letter, 25 June 1972, is titled Recovering Students and PCs. And it says that I'm not going to get into too much of I'm going to skip over some of the terminology. I'll just say that there are certain staff as well as ethics officers, it says here, who collide with students and PCs who have blown, parentheses, run away from the org. The recovery of these and getting them back on the line is of great interest to such personnel. In the first place, they muddy up a field. Okay, so in Scientology, you have the concept of an org and the field, the people who are being serviced by the org, the geographical area around it. That's its field, all the people who are in it. And if you have bad repute, if you have Scientologists who come in and then blow because of various reasons, which I'm about to lay out for you, then it creates bad repute in the field. It muddies up the field, as Hubbard would say. And he says in the second place, and this is all capitals now, every one of them can be gotten back. And that was the principle, the maxim that I operated on for years, is that every single one of these people who had ever evoked some interest, had said something and had signed up for services and had paid for stuff in Scientology, every single one of them could be gotten back. And if we couldn't get them back, it was our failure, not theirs. But it took crafty work and communication and figuring out what the reason was for them being gone. And Hubbard actually lays out here why they would leave. And he says if you leave them then they spoil prospects, right? So it's no good. You're going to get bad repute. And he says, it's interesting, he says, because tech does work, tech being Scientology, right? Because tech does work, this is not hard to do. Down deep, they know that we do have the answer. It's an apparent refusal to apply it to them they're concerned about. Poor offbeat supervision, poorly trained auditors, lack of cramming in an org get in your way. So you have to have a deep interest that tech in both courses and auditing is straight, right? So here he is saying, look, if they take off, it's on us. We got to deal with that. We didn't give them good service. But he says here, now why would they take off? Okay, well, you have students and you have pre-clears. And he says the reasons for them are different. The reasons why a student will take off out of a class is different from why a pre-clear would leave while he's getting auditing. And here are the 5 main blow reasons. Here we go. 1, misunderstood words or no materials. Okay, you show up to class, you start studying, they don't have the materials that you need. Screw this place, and you're out of there. Or you show up for class, you start studying, you're reading along, and you don't understand it, and you're going by words you don't understand, and it doesn't make sense to you, you're gone. So those are the first 2 reasons, and Hubbard says those are the biggest reasons. 2, no help or word clearing from the supervisors or no course supervisor at all. You're going in there to study, there's no soup, or they're not helping you. You need help? Hey man, I got a question. I ain't got time for you right now. Right? That's going to piss people off. Another instance of why people will leave: interference from the supervisors that stopped them from getting on. Now, this is an interesting one, and this is a difficult one because Hubbard's always insisting, as I've gone over with you guys, that you have to have a supervisor, and he's got to be Johnny on the spot to make sure that the students are getting their materials. And if the student is studying and he's yawning or he's not looking good or he doesn't look happy, the supervisor is supposed to come over and interfere with him and find out what's going on. But Hubbard says you can take that, you can go overboard with that, and people will feel harassed and they will take off and they won't appreciate it. So you got to balance that. You're supposed to be careful about that kind of thing. However, I can tell you, as a trained course supervisor who supervised thousands and thousands of hours of supervision in Scientology classrooms, that too much interference is the order of the day. That is the usual activity in Scientology. Number 4 is personal out ethics resulting in a withhold. It's on you now. This is the blame the victim part. This is you took off because you have some ethics situation that you're not being honest about. And that does come up. It was a thing, and that would be a reason a person might take off. And finally, you have 5, reason number 5, simply booted off for reasons best known to God or registrars, i.e. the salespeople. And Hubbard gives an example, like suddenly saying you must now buy this service, thus violating the deliver what we promise rule. In other words, you could start a class and then get told, oh, didn't anybody tell you? You have to buy this and this and this and this too. You can't even do the class until you do this. And then the guy might go, oh, well, fuck you, and take off. Okay, so you might have instances like that where basically a staff member just pisses the guy off and makes some unruly demand, and then they go. And Hubbard says the interference and the boot off reasons are the ones you'd least suspect. Both generate a lot of what he calls human emotion and reaction. All right, in other words, a lot of upset. People get pretty pissed. So those are the 5 reasons why, according to L. Ron Hubbard, any student will blow. Now, obviously, there could be a panoply of other reasons why somebody would leave Scientology or take off or not continue services anymore. But these are the only reasons Scientology will accept. Excuse me. Okay. Now, the reason most PCs blow, pre-clears, leave auditing, okay, there's only 4 reasons. These are technical, though, so I'm only going to kind of gloss over these. One of them is called out lists, and that's a technical thing where somebody basically tells you what's wrong with you and it doesn't make sense to you or indicate to you. And that's a process that goes on in auditing where you can be told the meter says your problem is blah or your thing is blah, and you might go, well, that's not true. And you might even only think it. Well, that's bullshit. And then you're like, well, this auditing sucks. I'm not doing this anymore. So that could be a reason. Another one is no auditing. You sign up for auditing, you pay for auditing, and then they don't deliver any auditing to you. And you show up and they're not there and there's no auditing happening. So you're like, well, screw this, and you take off and you don't come back anymore. Another one is invalidation of case or gains. You come out of an auditing session, in or out of session, actually. It can happen either way. And you have some big win or you're happy and somebody comes along and goes, well, that's no big deal. That sucks. That's stupid. Okay, you're out. You're done. You're like, oh, I guess this auditing didn't work after all. I guess I won't do it anymore. So you could have that. And finally, you could say there is told they'd attained it and hadn't. So this is an example where you're basically, Hubbard is saying, look, you attest someone or you tell someone, hey, you've achieved the state of clear or you've gotten this level done, but the person kind of knows that they haven't. They feel like they haven't. They don't feel like they've really achieved that. And then they'll be like, screw this. This is bullshit. And they won't come back. So those are your 4 reasons, according to Hubbard, of why somebody would quit auditing. Again, there could be many other reasons, but in Scientology, these are the only acceptable ones. And Hubbard advised that you could actually memorize these, which I did, and that you could run them off, sort of rattle them off with people when you talk to them. So the way that you would get them back is you would utilize these points and you would sort of assess it with them in conversation. And this is what I would do with people, is I would go to their homes or I would get them on the phone and I would say, hey, let's talk about, what your Scientology experience. Let's talk about what you were doing and how was it going and what happened. And sometimes they would tell you, and you could interpret one of these things in what they said, and you could go, well, that was wrong. That shouldn't have happened. I'm really sorry. We really shouldn't have done that. I can't believe you paid for all this auditing and the auditor never showed up, or they never scheduled you, or the registrar told you had to buy all this other auditing first, or the supervisor wasn't there to help you. That was off the rails. I am so sorry about that. Let's get that fixed. Why don't you come in and let's sort this out? And this would be my general approach in trying to get somebody back into the fold. The other thing I would do, and I think I've talked about this before, is in a coordination or with this, is there's another policy letter Hubbard wrote where he talks about the power of the initial purpose or drive or intent to do a thing. You sign up for Scientology services because you're in a state of ruin. You want to change or improve some condition or circumstance or trauma in your life. And that's a very strong motivation. And they have convinced you now, and remember when they sign you up for stuff, they have convinced you that Scientology can help you with this. So that purpose or drive is still there. That's what impelled you to do Scientology in the first place. And you can go back in and you can remind people about that and get them to tell you about, well, what happened when you first signed up? What were you feeling? What were you trying to handle? What was it you wanted to deal with in Scientology? And they'll tell you, if you're in good communication with them, I was having all these problems with my family, and wow, and are you still having problems with your family? Well, a little bit, yeah, I got this and this, and then you go, then what you're doing is you're trying to draw that purpose out of them, that failed purpose is what Hubbard calls it. It's a purpose or a drive that they had. And they went forward, and then it was like a rocket, and then it petered out because they ran into these problems and barriers, and they felt that they couldn't accomplish it. So it became a failed purpose. And what you do is you rehabilitate that failed purpose. You go, oh man, well, tell me about that. And you get them talking about it, and you kind of trying to manipulate them back into that headspace of when they thought that purpose was accomplishable, when it was something they wanted, and you rekindle it, you resuscitate it, right? By talking about it and getting them to talk about it and talking about why it was a good thing and why it's still possible that it could happen. And this is how I would manipulate people to come back into the church so that we could re-traumatize them, because basically that's what happened, is they would come back in, and maybe we would fix some things, and then eventually something else would screw up, because the nature of Scientology is what it is. It is a money-making scam, a destructive cult. So it does end up abusing and hurting people. So that was usually the way that went, or the way that goes. And I hope that gives you some idea of how this is dealt with in Scientology.